Welcome to today's session on how to prepare for the never normal and doubling the vaccination of your cyber protection posture. In this session, Matrix42 and Acronis will give you key takeaways for a main industry problem, the IT security and cyber protection. It's not others, it's our industry specifically that's under attack. You've read daily in the news, on blogs, on social. Threats are going to evolve and will never stop. I'm pleased to have two speakers here today that together have more than 30 years of experience in IT security and workplace management. JJ Yeager, Chief Revenue Officer and Board Advisor of Acronis, and Oliver Bendig, Chief Executive Officer of Matrix42.
Hey. Good. So thank you for the introduction. So welcome and thanks for joining. So what we thought we would like to do is basically share a little bit our view on cybersecurity and automation and why we believe this belongs together as a double vaccination. And for those of you who don't know Matrix42 or also Acronis, we thought it probably makes sense to give a little introduction into the company. So about Matrix42, we are a software vendor by nature. We provide a digital workspace management platform because we execute against the vision that we want to simplify and secure digital work. And what that basically means is that we see that customers are overwhelmed with complexity at the moment when it comes to the digital workspace as a whole, from management, security, automation, and service management processes and costs. And customers are searching for the easy button, and that easy button is Matrix42. And from a sizing perspective, we are more than 450 people of size, and we serve more than 5,000 customers by now. More than 10 million users are using our solutions every day, and we operate worldwide. And with that, JJ, let's introduce Acronis.
Thanks, Oliver, and thanks for everybody that's listening for joining our session. Really appreciate it. And yeah, for the ones that don't know, Acronis, we were founded in Singapore in 2003, now established as a financial headquarters and business headquarters in Switzerland since 2008. We are one of the leaders in cyber protection. With our vision is we would like to protect any kind of workload, applications, and services that had any kind of footprint in the digital space to make sure that you have the right protection in place for that particular content and information that you have. We are a little bit larger than Matrix, 1,700 employees. We are a global company. We have done last year about 150 countries transactions. And that's also one of our unique prides that we have. That even though we are a global country, we try to really establish and implement local strategies, and that brings also our 38 data centers that we have around the world right now. And even countries like, for example, Bhutan, where you would never think of doing potentially business, we actually have a local data center there to supply local services towards them. The most important thing is what we are proud of is our ecosystem. We are a partner vendor-driven ecosystem. Matrix is one of our partners, of course, as well, and vice versa. But the managed service provider partner ecosystem with more than 11,000 partners around the world is where we are very much focused on, and we're trying to help those particular vendors into establishing good cyber protection practices around the world with our technologies.
So thank you, JJ. And Acronis and Matrix42, we teamed up to combine cyber protection and automation, IT operations, and IT service management together. And the reason why this is important is because of this chart. The world is digital by now. We all know that every business nowadays is a digital business, and digital transformation, frankly, is the biggest opportunity of our generation. And you see here a few examples from drones, robots, Bitcoin, self-driving cars, 3D printer, many different technologies actually that we have to take care of from a business perspective. And it creates a lot of value for organizations, but it also comes with a challenge. And that challenge is how to protect it. So we see more and more complexity in IT organizations driven through more digital transformation in organizations. And the main question is, how do you really catch up and manage and secure this complexity? And that's the reason why Acronis and Matrix42, why we have teamed up. So what we see basically COVID accelerated this kind of situation, because we all know by now, after 2 years almost being in a pandemic, digital work changed completely, and probably changed completely forever, because many employees started and are working from home the last 2 years, and that accelerated the problem in terms of attack surfaces. Just recently, a study actually came out from Bitkom in Germany, where Matrix42 is located, and I just read the other day that it's actually doubled the amount of attacks into German organizations, doubled during the pandemic, which is a shocking fact. So it's a big challenge to solve. And how I describe this always to our customers is that I see and we see that digital transformation is evolving faster than security know-how in organizations. And with that kind of innovation gap and also know-how gap, obviously the question is, how can I improve my cyber protection and also my automation capabilities if something goes wrong, if it needs to be recovered within an organization? And that's exactly what Acronis and Matrix42, what we are doing and why we teamed up. Yeah, so, and we want to share a little bit more information, what we have seen in the market, and how digital transformation is evolving currently. But I know, JJ, you have an opinion about
jump
that.
on that. Like, it was overnight. Like, the digital transformation was already happening, right? For many years, we were moving already to the cloud and to the digital workspace, and people had already the concept of work from anywhere, remote. But what we had not anticipated when COVID hit in the beginning of 2000 around the world, that literally overnight, instantly, not only was the interest on how do I protect a remote workplace that I'm not part of my corporate infrastructure, that me as an IT specialist have not fully control over, how to handle that. You know, you think that that was already kind of established and that there were processes in place. We were surprised that literally from, I would say, almost March to June, the chaos that was created, and especially also, you know, because we protect, of course, a lot of remote workplaces already in the past, how intensified the alerts and the messages and the rollout of remote workplaces intensifies in those particular months. It was just crazy. And we did multiple projects with partners. It was not only about software, but also how do I acquire hardware, right? Like, it was this massive hardware rush from everyone, because everybody had to have a laptop because they are working from home right now. And that, of course, as what Oliver mentioned, what you mentioned, it brought so many additional questions and different challenges. And then people start realizing on what has happened in the last 10, 20 years in the industry.
Yeah.
And that is such a rapid growth. If you look at the graph that you see here, there's so much changes in the security and attack fronts and exposures that we have seen in the last 20 years. It's just massive. And in the beginning of 10, 20 years ago, you were still capturing it and you will be able to categorize it and know which families there are. But starting from, I would say, the middle of 2015 around, you were not able to capture anymore the families of ransomware or different kind of viruses because it's just too many. And then the question is also, how do you protect against that? And because everything is changing so fast, you will not be able to catch up with just standard approaches of how you manage IT. The funny thing, though, is, and I'm not sure if you've seen that, Oliver, but if you look what actually has changed in the sense of how we get attacked, it's kind of the same as what we had like 5 to 10 years ago. It's still malware, it's still ransomware, it's still hacking and Trojans and errors, of course. So it maybe changed a little bit in order, what is now more and what is less, but it has not really changed, right? We're still fighting the same problems that we have been fighting for the last 10 years. So it's very interesting that so much has changed, but actually it's still in the same, confined areas that we're dealing with, and it is also here to stay. It is not going away. That means that it's a very important topic to keep paying attention to.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, JJ, I think, of course, as you know, we are very much on the focus on the endpoint on the workspace, and what we saw in our customer base is obviously the attacks that are more used from an insider perspective, that you try to use the workspace that is somehow connected now remotely to the infrastructure, that this is used as a main entry point. In fact, I mean, even prior COVID, IDC came out with a report where they said 70% of the attacks have their origination on the endpoint on the workspace. So that's the reason why we, Acronis and Matrix42, we believe, especially on the workspace side, that's just such a critical service to protect. And we want to share a little bit how we want to do
human mistakes. You know, people still don't realize that you can have the best protection in the world, but and human is still a human, and human mistakes, just by a simple misconfiguration, can expose a new exploit that a hacker can use. And it's very hard to protect against that with software, because we are still humans, right? Not robots.
Yeah, and we have a few stories to share, because somehow there are myths and like everyday challenges about cybersecurity. But let's talk a little bit about the myths. And JJ and I share the same view about it. And let's start with some of these pictures here, because somehow the myth is that cybersecurity attacks are always done by people that wear a hoodie and are kind of script kids, and they do this in their spare time to annoy customers and companies. But in fact, it's a true business nowadays, that data gets stolen, that malware attacks are done, that people really want to earn money, obviously, with it. So it's not just the script kids anymore. It's highly professional attacks. In fact, when I look at the last 2 years, especially during COVID, what we've seen in our customer base, that these were very, very targeted attacks at customers that were not fully protected. And again, mostly from the endpoint side. The second picture that you see here is actually an AI or robot picture that plays against the professional play. And what we mean with that is that AI and machine learning and automation is so good at nowadays that it can beat, in this picture here, for instance, a professional ping pong player. And if you use that analogy and transfer it to cyber security and automation, this is also what we see in the field, that the bad guys, they use very, very clever and modern technologies and techniques to automate attacks against infrastructure and organizations. So our view about this is that automated attacks need automated defense. Otherwise, it is an uphill battle that you can't win. And that's the reason why Acronis and Matrix42 are partnering up. But you have some more stories to share, right, JJ?
Yeah, no, just imagine you put here 5 professional ping pong players against those 5 arms and machines. I bet you they will bump in each other constantly. And even though they are the best in the world, they will still not be able to beat, or maybe they were able to beat in the beginning, but soon they have catched up and learned from the mistakes or the vulnerabilities that those best players have and exploited, of course, as much as possible. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And it brings us also towards this, you know, I think the most funniest picture on this slide is a pig with lipstick. There are great tools out there that can protect you. You know, antivirus companies and, you know, security companies out there, they all have really great tools. But the biggest challenge that we have is that, especially in the last 5 years, so much has changed. Digitalization, COVID move towards remote workplaces, but also the move towards the cloud has had a major transformation on how the foundation of software, but also the foundation of how you need to protect has changed. But if you look at the majority of the vendors out there, they're, I would not say prehistoric, that would be no wrong word, but they are pretty old. And we all know, you know, some of the major challenges if you have a very old code base, traditional build for on-premise or a specific use case scenario, that has now completely changed, and you need to think different as well. So what you see now a lot is that a lot of older technologies trying to adjust themselves, and that's why putting a lipstick on a pig to enhance and adopt towards what is happening in the industry. But what really needs to happen is a complete different approach, because just by a silo protection solution that you enhance and beautify a little bit with a nice little red lipstick will not solve your problems, what Oliver just was thinking about. And that brings us then also towards, the automation and integration piece. Means we work now much more into the cloud, and the cloud can actually help us to learn and to fight also more of those particular attacks together. And based on AI, machine learning, exactly what those attackers do as well, we can do that as well. And that's why the picture of the data center. But it brings us towards that critical point, is that COVID has already made us realize that we need to now think a little bit different of how we are going to work, but it means also how we need to protect ourselves, because the workspace is now somewhere different. And we need to think the approach also how we are going to protect ourselves. In the past, you build a house, you build a foundation, you build your walls, and you build the roof to protect you against the elements. But right now, we say, or we believe, you need to think differently. First, what you need to build is your roof. You need to figure out how are you going to protect yourself against the elements and to what is out there in the digital space that could harm you. Then on top of that protection layer, you build your walls of your services, your offerings, and your tools that you need to work with. And that layers the foundation at the end to make sure that everything works and sticks together. And that is still where a lot of vendors, and even also Acronis many years ago, had to approach differently to make sure that we approach this particular topic in a different way. And I think that comes back towards then, Oliver, how we work together as well, because that's exactly what we believe is the new
Exactly.
is how we work and how we integrate together.
Exactly, and it's a good point to hand over to then from our point of view, also a very, very important topic, which is then the experience of the end user. Because the challenge that we hear and see sometimes is that the pendulum is moving to a very, very difficult area if you scale up your security practice, because then it gets clumsy in terms of usability for the end user. And the analogy that I use quite often then to describe this is how security should be built in and how it should be perceived by an end user by comparing it to a car, because we all know that a car has many security systems. So one very simple one, which is the brake, right? But a car has also a lot of security systems that help me to drive better, EBS, EPS, radar, things that help me to get a better driving experience. And that's how we see security should work also on the endpoint. And in our world, what is that? Obviously, it's two-factor authentication, it's identity and access management, it's integrated patch management, it's integrated remediation and automatic recovery. So basically everything that helps me to get a better driving experience on the endpoint, right? So security should not stay in the way. It needs to be built in, it needs to be integrated. And we want to break down silos with the approach of Matrix42 and Acronis together.
Yeah, and that brings us then towards the real problem, right? There's so many vendors out there and so many tools. How do you pick the right ones, and how do you make sure that you cover everything? And especially, and that is the biggest problem, is that many vendors are having excellent products and services that you can use, but it's not about the silo individual decisions anymore what you're going to use for a protection layer, but it's going to be very important how those vendors and tools are working together. But it brings also other elements as problems, right, Oliver? Because that's what you and your software is dealing with a lot.
Yeah, look, I mean, the other two elements on this chart is too many alerts and too much manual labor. And to explain this also, I mean, if we build up now integrate more security, and we get more telemetry and more analytics and user behavior and all that information about protection and things that are happening in my infrastructure, I might see not clearly because of all the noise that I'm getting. So what we believe is needed is a solution that actually removes that noise and shows you clearly on the alerts that are happening what is important, what's not important, and give you capabilities to automatically remediate it or automate it. And that's the reason why we believe that cybersecurity and IT operations should go hand in hand. Because if you have a security attack, if you have a suspicious action in your infrastructure, in your in your network, on applications, on the endpoint, you probably want the system to react to it. And wouldn't it be great that you can easily define this and the system actually creates an automatic defense strategy without human interaction? And that's the kind of vision that Acronis and Matrix42 are executing against. And with that, we have actually built an integration of both of our product portfolios. And maybe let me start with a first example, what Matrix42 provides here. We, as already described, we are masters in what I call hyper automation. We can literally change anything in the infrastructure automatically, especially on the endpoint. And Gartner nowadays calls this AI ops, artificial intelligence operations, which basically means if I have a security event or an alert or even an attack that are recognized in the infrastructure, we can automatically react to it. I always describe it like the system already provides the resolution and remediation before I recognize that there was an attack, right? This is all driven through workflows. That's one of the key elements of our platform. The second thing that I want to maybe share as a use case perspective is also that then end users can drive this whole configuration, backup and recovery scenarios through self-service in our platform. We are a fully fledged IT service management, enterprise service management solutions where end user can easily configure the endpoint to your needs or to their needs, and also provide and orchestrate backup and recovery scenarios that are then orchestrate Acronis. Yeah, so there are multiple integration points that we have with both platforms, and we have started and have actually delivered a very great integration scenarios. But I know, JJ, you also wanted to share a few that you like about the integration.
Yeah, like, you know, if you look at what you're trying to do always, you try to balance, right? And we call it SAPAS. It's like, it's safety, it's accessibility, it's privacy, it's authenticity, and security. Those are 5 elements that are super important, right? If you make your, I would say, safety too high, nobody can access it, so your accessibility is low. But if you basically, you know, make your security very high, and then, you know, your privacy or something else is going to be impacted. So those elements need to be very clearly balanced. And what we're trying to do with cyber protection is making sure that those 5 elements are always in the right balance. To do that, what needs to be done is protecting your environments. But what we have been trying to bring across in the last couple of slides as well, it's not about doing a backup, because a backup is great, or doing the right patch. Patching is very important. And also not about doing security, because security is important, but how are those elements working together? And that's exactly where I would like to give you an example. For example, if you want to do a patch to make sure that your system stays patched in the latest levels and good protection, you want to make sure that you have a backup. So with the integration with Matrix42 and Acronis, what we can do through this automation and management and integration, you decide to do a patch, and not doing a manual step to go to your backup, making backups before you do a patch. That step is taken care of automatically. But before that happens, security checks that patch if it is actually a patch that is good, and not what we've seen, sadly, in our industry with, for example, on SolarWinds or Kaseya, that they were actually injected with some kind of code that ultimately exposed some of those systems. And so that automatic step is taken care of, then you will do the backup automatically. You don't have to take care of it. If the patch is played in and everything is fine, great. If the patch is wrong or something is not working, then you can also roll back automatically, doing the same steps in the sense of taking an existing backup that you've not taken and roll it back. And that are all manual step that does what is happening today a lot. And you can automate that because it's all connected to each other. And especially in the world of data authenticity, in the sense of, is that data that I backed up truly the data that I want to recover, or is in the data that I'm backing up already something that I don't know about? Coming back towards the slide about the world is changing so much that a lot of people today don't even know that they're already exposed. But because the world has changed into, if I'm in, I want to do damage as quickly and as fast as possible, towards I'm in, I'm going to wait that I can penetrate your systems and more devices because the more I'm penetrated in your systems, as soon as I trigger my ransomware, the more pressure you have to pay me a ransom, because this is now a financial model. That is exactly what we're trying to identify and protect with Acronis Cyber Protection, and with the automation integration to simplify people's lives with that. And that makes this partnership really cool and interesting, because that is the new way to go for the future if you look at what is happening out there in the world.
And that's the reason why we call this webinar also the double vaccination. You know, you need 2 shots to be protected, and these 2 shots are Matrix42 and Acronis to help you to protect your workload, your infrastructure, your endpoint. But to sum this up, we want to summarize with a couple of key takeaways from this presentation. So the first one, JJ.
Yeah, so, standard defense is not good enough any longer. As already mentioned, just taking one tool or one vendor is not going to help you prevent for what is out there. And I think what is also very important in the sense of the analogy of a vaccination, I hope everybody knows that even if we are double vaccinated, that doesn't mean that you cannot get sick. And that's what we want to make highlight here as well, that a standard defense is not enough. You also need to think about not defending, but also what is your process after that from a recovery perspective.
Exactly. And the second one is it needs to be integrated in automation, break down the silos, because one thing is also clear: the bad guys are not working with manual attacks anymore. It's highly specialized, it's highly automated, it's driven through AI, which basically means if you feel and see automated attacks, the only answer can be automated defense, because manual defense strategies are just too slow, which means the combination with Acronis and Matrix42 provides you exactly that, to get the information from the cybersecurity side and drive automation in Matrix42 to protect you or to remediate you.
Yeah, we've seen it too many times in the last 12 months, ever since COVID started, that people trying to solve that security element that has now exposed them more because of the remote works by adding resources towards the security team. It maybe helps you in the short term to quickly cover some of the gaps that you have, but it definitely will not solve your problem. And that is also very important. And that brings it into point 3, right? Now, security concerns, should not slow down your organization. Actually, it will slow down if you don't do it, because you can and you will be, in some point or form, be hacked or exposed, and that will definitely slow down your organization. So it needs to be very clear, a priority, and it should definitely be a point that should get the proper attention. And so from that perspective, let not that slow down your progress in this particular space.
And if I can add to that, I mean, many organizations think that security is then a big project, which actually slows down my business, and it's difficult to implement, and it is that more difficult for people to work. But hopefully we also shared with some of the examples, you can implement this, that it's actually a business enabler, right? Because if you're not protected, if you don't have that double shot, then you might see challenges going forward. But that leads us to number 4, which is breaking down the silos. As we mentioned, integration is key. And look, I mean, what we, especially from the IT operations side, see the last several months and also years is this agile transformation in IT operations. And we had this on a previous slide, DevOps, but basically it's really DevSecOps, so that you have development, designing a service and application, securing it and operating it in the organization is one unified process, or should be one unified process, because of 2 things. Number 1, it's fast, so you support against your business goals. But number 2, it's also security is built in. So we believe this integrated approach with cyber protection, cyber security, and IT operation is key for future success.
Yeah, and the last but not least, never stop, right? I'm pretty sure you heard it before as well. It's not about if you will be exposed or hacked. It's more about when it will happen. And you need to be prepared for it, right? It means that never stop. And that's, for us as a security company, you have a great tool that you've developed yesterday, it could be outdated tomorrow. So if you don't continuously improve yourself in your learning, as a company like Acronis, you will be outpaced very quickly. And that's exactly what you need to think of as well. It means security is not something that you do today and you're done for tomorrow. Security is what you do today, and you make sure that you keep on paying attention towards it ongoing, because what is out there, the pace is super fast, and if you don't keep up, eventually you will get exposed.
Exactly. And hopefully that this presentation showed you that there's a lot of benefits, and there are a lot of benefits in combining cyber protection and IT operations and IT service management together. And if you want to learn more about this, then please get in touch with us through the Acronis website or Matrix42. We are very happy to continue the conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks, JJ.